Hey, in this video, I'm going to show you how to build a leather cover for any book. I'm going to show you how to take measurements and how to create your own pattern for that. But this is part of a series. If you like seeing construction on different projects or want to see tooling patterns, watch me step by step through those tooling patterns and get those patterns that you can use. Be sure to check out other videos in this series as well. The book that I'm going to be working with today, this is an actual monthly planner. I know it's on paper, not on your phone. Some people are still like that, right? They still like to use that pen and paper method to stay on track. If that's you, I will put a link for this exact book down in the description there if you do want to work with this one or have it to gift for people, I don't know. But if not, follow along with these instructions and use it to put a cover on any type of journal, Bible, book, anything that you want to use for a leather cover. I'm going to show you the process right now. The way we're going to construct this is so that there is a front, a back, a separate spine piece, and then we're going to create two pockets on the inside that the front and back cover will slip into. That way we can change this out. If you're using the monthly planner, you can change out your planner every year, or whatever the case is. Maybe it's a journal that you're filling up and needing a new journal. So we're going to make it to where you can take this cover on and off. The first thing we need to figure out is the measurements on our front and back. So when I look to measure this, I'm measuring across here. We need to not just measure the cover itself, right? That cover itself is coming out to 5 5/8, but we have to remember we need to stitch around here. So we need to allow for that stitch room there. So we're gonna leave a 3/8 seam allowance basically. So a 3/8 allowance around here. And that's gonna take us up to 6 inches wide for this particular one. So I'm just going to take my little notes here. I'm going to write down my 6 inches so I know that that's where we're at. And now height wise, let's look at that. Now we're going to measure. This is on the shorter side. It's almost shorter side 8 1/2. We're really technically more like 8 3/8 there. So I'm going to add to that so we can add on to either side, and I'm going to make that 9 inches. That way we have almost 3/8 on top and bottom to allow for that stitch room on there. So we're going to go 9 inches up and down here. Just to get a visual on this, I'm going to run 6 inches wide. We're going to come down. I would come down 9 inches, but I drew that too low here. So we're going to erase and start that again. Well, this is the true process I go through on any one of these here. So now I got room to run my 9 inches tall. I like using these bigger rulers like this because they act as a square at the same time. 6 inches there. All right, so now we have what our front and back cover is going to be like. And you can see where we set that book in there, there's room around the top side. Shift where you can see it here. Around this side here as well as the bottom. And that's where that stitch line is going to be able to go to. Now, we'll cut 2 of these pieces, but then we also need that spine. Now, our spine, again, we don't want it to be just the height of that book like that. We need to have some room for it to come underneath here. because we're going to stitch that down. So if we are, we're about 7/8 of an inch on this one here as I'm looking right straight down that. We're going to add to that. We're going to make sure we add at least a 1/2 inch to either side of that, so we have room to overlap here, but we'll give plenty. We're at 7/8, so we're just going to add a 1 1/8 to that. We'll make it clear up to 2 inches, so we have plenty of room on that. So our spine is going to need to be the length of that book, or the length of our front and back pieces, which we already figured at 9 inches. And so our spine is going to be 9 inches by 2 inches. Well, the next thing we got to look at cutting is going to be our inside piece that's going to create this pocket. And when I do that, I don't want that pocket to be too far down the book, otherwise we can't get it in there. And we also don't want it to be too far out to the end, because then as you open that book, it can fall out of there. So we're going to come just about halfway on that, which if we're 6 inches wide, we'll just make that 3 inches for our spine, or for our pockets. So on our cut list here, we got our main body times 2. We got our spine times 1. And then we have our pockets. They're going to be 3 inches by 9 inches. And that is going to be times 2 as well. Now, let's figure out what we're going to cut this out of for leather. My front and back piece, I want that to be something substantial because we're going to be able to tool that. So I'm going to be using 8/9 ounce on the front and the back, and then my spine as well as my pockets are going to be 3/4 ounce. So let's get some leather out and go to cutting. So we got our 8/9 ounce leather here, and there's already a nice straight edge on this piece, so I'm going to grab my big Omnigrid here and cut right off of that. Now, if you want this cut list as well as the tooling pattern that I'm going to draw up for this, we're going to make those available in the Leather Life classroom, or the Leather Life community, excuse me. And if you're not a part of that community already, we'll drop the link down in the description here as well, so you can come be a part of that free community and get around others who are like-minded and working to improve their leather work as well. So I line that up here. This happens to be 6 inches wide because we're making 2 pieces for the main body that are 6 by 9 inches. So I can make my marks right on there if we're going to mark it out. Again, I like to save steps if we can. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this while I have it held here. I know this is 6 inches wide, which is what I need those pieces to be. I'm going to walk my hand down, so I'm never cutting past my fingers. I want my fingers to be on that straight edge to keep that support so it's not moving on me. On this end here, I can reach over and cut that as well. Now I'm working with a nice 6-inch wide piece. I'm going to measure down, always double checking my measurements and hitting the camera any chance I get, obviously. Okay, double check my measurements. I'm 6 inches wide. I need 9 inches long. So move that down to 9. Cut that across. our second one. So we do have now our front and our back. That's 6 inches by 9 inches. Double check that to our book. And we're gonna have room to stitch around there just like we have it planned. Now we need to cut out of our 3/4 ounce for our spine and our 2 pockets there. So we'll set that 8/9 aside, grab some 3/4. I wanna come down here and make sure we have a good piece, and I have some really nice leather right down here at the end of this belly. Now, double check, I got a nice straight line on here already, so we can use that line. We need to be 9 inches tall on the pockets as well as the spine. So I'm gonna come down here and see right about in here that gets a little soft, so I'm gonna stay up above there. Slide across a little bit, keeping that squared up. All right. So now we can work from this side here. Our pockets are 3 inches wide. So I know I need 2 of these that are 3 inches wide. I can measure up to my 9 inches here. That's, again, the length that we want. Cut that pocket and slide right on over. Our second pocket, and then lastly was our spine on my cut list there. So that's our same 9 inches, but 2 inches wide is what we need for this. I really like these rulers because you can see right through them, measure off any line or any edge it's already cut. We can see where this is going to start coming into play. These pockets are going to be going on the inside, which is going to allow that book to slide in there and be held. At this point, though, we need to take our pieces and go do any tooling and finish work that we want to have done on here. So we're going to go draw a tooling pattern up and do a whole separate video on the full tooling of that pattern. Again, be sure to check the playlist that you're in here to get that next video to see the tooling on here. And if you want the pattern, then check out the Leather Life community in that description below. So just like that, we're gonna have this tooled and ready to put a finish on. There we go, all tooled up just like that. But if you do want to see the video where we did the full tooling on there, be sure to check back in the series. We did post that, and there's a link in there, just like in this video, to the Leather Life community, and that's where you can get the pattern if you want to tool yours up just like this as well. But now that the tooling's done, we're going to take the tape off the back and get this thing ready to go to the dye and finish station. And I'm going to show you the finish that we put on here that is going to allow us to come back later and customize it. That's one trick for getting tape up. Just using that scratch awl helps get underneath the edge of that, I've found. Okay. Now this side I didn't tape because all I did was put my maker's mark on there. So we don't have any tape to take off of that one. But before I put a finish on here, I do want to come back with my stitch groove. Now, running a stitch groove is not something you have to do. I do suggest at least a guideline, meaning you could use your wing dividers or your stylus or anything to put a little line so you know where you're stitching at. But I like the groove because it sets that stitch right down in the groove. Just a really nice finished professional look. But the reason I like putting this groove in before I do my finish is you can almost see how when we cut that away, it's even a little bit brighter colored underneath there because we've cut away that little groove off the top. Now, if you do that after all your finish is on, that's a really kind of a bright glowing line. And if you're off on your stitch at all, or that stitch doesn't completely fill, which your stitch is never going to completely fill that groove, you see that kind of that bare leather underneath, and I don't like that look. So I like to run this stitch groove now before we put a finish on it. So now that that's grooved, we're going to take all of our pieces, even our pockets and our spine, over to a finish station where we can start putting some things on there. We're going to do a really simple finish on this, but it's going to look professional, and it's also going to allow us to come back and customize later on, where we'll actually be able to wet that down and tool in here if you want to cut in initials or brands or logos or anything like that. So the first step is going to be our neat's foot oil. This label's all messed up on this one, is why it's on our desk here, but the 100% pure neat's foot oil is what I like using. And I just apply this with a scrap of sheepskin here. With any of my finishes, I always get in the habit of working in circles. That's gonna help avoid any streaks. Your oil isn't gonna really streak all that bad because it's gonna blend in and absorb into that leather really well, but good habit to get into anyways. So we're just putting a nice light coat on there. It's gonna, right now it helps rich in that color, but ideally that's gonna soak in there and lighten back up. But it's helping to kind of rejuvenate that leather a bit too. It's been dried out over the process of the tanning, and then like that piece with our tooling, you're wetting down, drying out, wetting down, drying out. So this helps put a little something back into that leather and gives it a little more longevity and life in the product. People ask about care. How do I care for my products after I get those? With this finish process where we're putting that oil back in, really a lot of these leather products can go a long time without any sort of care other than, if you get it dirty, wipe it down, just clean it up a little bit. But unless it's out in the elements a lot, or like horse tack where it's getting sweat on and things like that, then your typical things like a day planner aren't going to really need that much care other than simply wiping off if you get them dirty. So we're going to let this oil sit on here and soak in a bit. I always say a good rule of thumb, give each step an hour to dry. Again, that's just an easy rule to remember and follow. But once this color starts going back in a little bit, then we'll be ready to move on to the next step. So we'll let this sit and come back here in a minute. That's had a chance to set. So now we're going to come back with tan coat. Now I'm using tan coat for a specific reason here. I don't typically resist with a tan coat because it's not really formulated to do a full resist. It's to allow things to penetrate through it. So it will resist some, and that's what we're kind of looking at here is we're putting that first seal on our leather. So I'm working in circles, getting this down in here. Just working all the way. Now some people use this as a resist for everything they do and get great results. So I'm not really knocking it. It's just not what I typically do. Typically I will use Resin as a resist because it is a true resist and it will seal that leather off. But like I said, we want to be able to come back later on and get this wet down to be able to tool it again for the customization. So that's why I'm using the tan coat here. When we come back in antique, it's going to allow a little bit of that to bleed through there, but that's okay. We're going to get a really nice finish. I'm going to show you how to do it. But I've done that one. I'm going to go ahead and stick a coat of tan coat on all of our other pieces as well. Again, working in these nice circles and getting just nice even coverage on here. And we're going to go ahead and let this dry. Again, let's use that rule of thumb, give it an hour, we'll let this dry, and then we'll come back with our next step in the process here. That's had a chance to dry now, so for this next step, I do recommend putting a glove on, maybe even two, depending on how messy you are. But we're going to use a medium brown antique finish. And this finish here, I really like. We're going to go right over top of that tan coat. We're going to put a pretty generous amount on. Again, working in those circles. I'm wanting to make sure I get it all the way down into my background spots here as well. And I don't want to take a ton of time. I know we're going to have some bleed through just because that tan coat's made for that, but it will resist to some degree, so we want to give it the best chance of doing that, and that means not letting this sit on here for too long of a period. So this is a small enough project I can get it all in one piece. Again, working that down into all those background spots, making sure we're in all of our decorative cuts and all of our bevel lines. We'll set that aside, and what I really like for wiping this off is the inside of a sock. The texture of it works really well. It grabs that antique good. Now, this has given us a really nice finish. It did darken that leather a little bit, but it resisted enough to allow us to wipe some of this off, get a little bit of that highlighted look down in all of our cuts, and grabbed a hold of our backgrounds enough to give that really nice look there. So over top of this, the next thing that we're just going to come right on top with, oh, I don't want to do that quite yet. I'm going to do the back of this so you can see how much that darkened that leather up by penetrating through our tan coat. And I do want my front and back to match, so I'm going to go ahead and antique the back of this, and it will darken that leather up a bit. But I'm just going to do them both together, that way we get the same even finish on both sides of this project. The pockets and the spine I'm not worried about. I don't mind that. There's our spine there. I don't mind that being a little bit lighter color. It's going to kind of stand us off a little bit. You know, and gives it a little bit of that different finished look with that lighter color in the middle of that spine. But I don't know, I'm sitting there looking at it. I'm gonna go ahead and make it match just because it's maybe a little bit too much of a contrast for what I'm after. So we're gonna design on the fly and antique that piece up as well. So again, we're gonna come back get this wiped off here. We'll wipe it off of the spine where we just put that on. There we go, that'll be a little bit. I think that's gonna be a better look than having that spine be that much lighter. Okay, now we're gonna come right back over top of this with our tan coat again. I'm leaving the video go so you can see just how long I'm taking. I'm not letting this antique sit and dry for an hour or anything right here. We're gonna grab our tan coat again and come right back over top with that. And what this is gonna do, it's gonna do two things. One, it's gonna help seal that leather a little bit more. It'll help seal that antique. It's also gonna help us pull a little bit of antique off of that smooth part too. So you'll see when I come back and wipe this with that blue paper towel that we're gonna be pulling some antique with it, and that's all right. So again, I'm getting that down in there to where it's mixing with my antique that's down in those cuts in the background. And we're gonna wipe across that. This is gonna help kind of crisp up that finish a little bit, clean things up. And you can see where we pulled antique off of there. I also had some antique pull off onto our sheepskin, but we're gonna set this one aside so it can dry. We'll do the same thing on the spine and the back of this. And this does dry pretty darn quick or start to set up. So that's why I wanna be kind of ready right away with that paper towel so that we don't get a swirled, muddy look to that. We want to be able to pull that extra off of there. And you can see that antique picked up in the pores of that leather a little bit, so it really does give it a true antique finish and look to that. Catch the back of this real quick as well. See it pull more of that off of there too. So these pieces can sit and dry. I'm gonna let those dry for a bit before we start messing with them on the construction side of this. But as soon as those are dry, we'll come back and put this together. Before I put this together here, we got to think about your construction a little bit. We have the spine right there, and our front and our back are going to go over top of that spine. Once we do that, we're not going to be able to get to these edges to slick those. So we need to step ahead and slick the edges on the inside of the spine. Be sure to make that you're putting it together right. Think about how that book's going to go together for your front and back, top and bottom, so we don't get something mixed up and a maker stamp upside down or anything like that. But on the inside edges here of our front and back, we're going to come by, we'll run our edger. First, we'll do that top and bottom on these pieces. Just take the extra little fuzzies off the back side there, and then we'll move into slicking them. And double check which side I want the top and the bottom to be. This pattern can really go either way, but I think I like it. Gosh, I don't even know. Looks good both ways. I like it like this. I'm gonna go like this. So my inside edge is over here. All right, now to get an edge, I'm going to do a video just on edges, but rough idea here. We got that edged off with our tool. Now I'm going to take a little sandpaper and just start getting that sanded a little bit slick there. The more prep work we can do on our edge, the easier it's going to be to slick that. we talked about that a little bit on last month's project as well. You know, it just comes down to how much prep you want to put into those edges. And you can even, like this is a 320 grit here on my sandpaper. And you can just keep sizing down on your grits. Well, I guess you'd be going up with your grits, so it gets to be finer sandpaper. And really get this feeling super smooth before you even start with anything else. And then the rest of your steps go really easy. But I'm gonna dye an edge on this. I think it looks good as far as just bringing things together. So I got this little edge marker from Maker's Leather Supply, but I have Cordovan leather dye in there, Phoebe's leather dye. And I need to grab a little scrap because just push that down to load the tip on it. I just love how fast these go on the edges. If you don't have these edge markers, I like the foam, little foam brushes. They're just kind of the same size as the little 1-inch chip brush, but made out of foam. Those work really good on edges as well. Edges dyed up there, and I'm not worried about the rest of the edges because we'll pick those up later after we have things constructed together. But this month we'll use gum trag. Last month we showed you a different product, and again I'm going to do a video just on slicking edges because I really pretty firm believer it's not a matter of which product you're using. There's lots of different options. It's kind of the effort in the prep and the finish. But get a nice little thin layer of that on there. Then with my canvas we'll add in the important step of a little bit of elbow grease here at the end. Nice and smooth. Okay, now I'm going to get this other one slicked up and then we'll talk about construction. Now we need to do some marking and gluing. So the way we have this laid out here, our front, back, and spine, we need to mark where that front and back is going to go onto our spine at. So a good rule of thumb is a 3/8 seam allowance on a lot of things that you build. So we're going to stick with that here. And I'm going to come out to 3/8, and I'm going to come just under 3/8 when I scribe this line. Because we want to be able to cover that line up pretty good. So I don't want to see that line by the time we get done. And it's just a real light scribe line there. We'll do the same thing on this side. Okay. Now on the back side of these, same edge where we did our edging at, I need to mark the same thing I'm gonna, again, hold in just a little bit shy of that 3/8 mark. And on this one, I'm gonna come mark it with something I can see pretty good. I'm just gonna run a pin right on the inside of that. Now this is showing us where we're gonna need to put glue at. Now with that marked, we're going to go ahead and put glue on these edges on the top and these edges on the bottom, and then we'll talk about putting those together. But we're going to go with my glue can. This is barge contact cement that I have in here, so just get a nice light. Trying to be careful so I don't get too much on here. There we go. Nice thin light layer on the backs of these and the front of this one, and we let those sit and tack up, kind of dry before I put them together. Glue's dried up, feeling pretty good and tacky right now. So now we can go to lay our pieces on here. Now, again, we marked that line just a little bit shy, so now we can make sure we cover that line when I come and lay this down. Matching up my ends, looking over my line. Making sure we're set in place. I can even use that straight edge. Make sure things are squared up with the spine. We're looking good. Press that down good. I'll do the same thing. We'll lay this front in here. Looking at my edge, covering up that line. I'm gonna grab my straight edge, make sure we got these lined up good. Nothing's running out of whack here. All right. With those pressed down good, we can turn that over. Now what we got to mark for is our pockets. Because these pockets are going to come, lay right on the inside here. This is what this, the ends of the book, front and the back there, the covers, there we go. That's the word I was after. So the covers are going to come in there. But I'm just lining that pocket up to the edge. I'm going to come under here, make a little mark. Again, I'm a little bit underneath, so that way we don't ever have any marks showing, which once you put your book in here, you're not going to see this anyways, but I like to just make sure. It's good habit to get in, not have exposed marks. That out to the edge, make sure we're set. All right, so now with these marks, we can come around and put glue on our 3 edges. And then same thing, 3 edges on your pocket. Don't get carried away and do 4, because that makes it not a very good pocket when it's glued down. So we'll glue 3 edges on both of these, just like we did the other parts. Let those sit and tack before we put them together. All right, these are tacked up now. Again, you're about quarter inch to 3/8 inch around with that glue. We don't want a ton in there, but enough that it's going to hold good while we go sewing this. So when I come to glue something on a corner like this, I like to use these 2 fingers here. It makes it easy to guide that right to the corner, check my mark. I'm watching my edge as I lay down here. I make sure that we're all the way over that edge. I'd rather have just a little bit sticking out over the edges than a little bit height tucked back behind there. So if that makes sense, I'd rather be long than short, because when we stitch, we want to make sure we catch that back side. And if we need to trim a little off that edge, not a big deal, but it's hard to add leather in. Okay, so that's pushed down on that one. Let's get this one set here. Again, watching that corner, making sure we're out to that edge. And then you notice how I just kind of jump over to this corner. That's a straight edge, so that should lay down fine. So make sure we're here in case we need to do any pulling, stretching, tweaking, anything like that. There we go. Now everything's set in place. We're ready to go to the sewing machine, but one thing, this is just kind of a little inside tip and trick too, but when we're going to be sewing, we're going to be sewing all the way around here. And if you're hand sewing, I apologize, it's a bit of hand sewing, so not as fun of a project at that point. But if you're hand sewing, actually, here's another tip too. All you have to sew on this is down this line and then right around your pocket. So you can save a little bit of sewing there if you want. But on a machine, we gotta remember we're walking up and down a layer right there. So if you take this over to the marble and we hit this down with our flat face hammer there, we'll actually create a nice smooth ramp as opposed to that hard step, and it's gonna make that a little easier. We're just gonna walk right here and I'm gonna show you how to do that. If you're watching still at this point in the video, you don't care if I move the camera like that because you're into this and ready to get better, so that's awesome. So just flat face hammer on my marble. Doesn't take much, but now see how it's just such a smooth gradual run off of there as opposed to that sharper step. So it's less that machine's going to catch up on and want to snag, just less you have to babysit while you're stitching that. So do the same thing on the inside corners of those spines too. Now it's ready to head over the machine. So again, we're gonna stitch all the way around there. If we have a continuous stitch like this, we'll just start down here and roll around and overlap 4 or 5 stitches there. Generally on something like this, where I start and stop at, we're gonna probably come just right down here. One of these bottom corners is great. I wouldn't want to start and stop out here on an edge that's a real prominent edge to see, just because you do see when those stitches are overlapped a little bit where your thread ends are. So anyways, we're gonna run over there and stitch this up. All right, we're stitched up and rolling here. Again, stitched down all those. Like I said, I just overlapped my stitches right down here at the corners and stitched all the way around. Now, one thing, like, we're squished out just a little bit on that pocket, so I got a little extra hanging out there. Not a big deal. That's why I said I'd rather have extra on the outside than less on the inside. So before we start edging that, I'm just going to come by and trim that excess off. Makes our edges that much smoother and easier. Same thing here on that spine, just pushed out just a hair, so not bad. I'm just going to take that little edge off by trimming it, and that saves a lot of the sanding work. we go to edge something. All right, now we're going to follow the same, oops, knock you around on the camera there. Okay, same process as we did on the edges on these insides. We're going to go by with our edger first. You got to kind of be careful when you're stepping down off of where that pocket is. You don't gouge into that. I'm not going to worry about putting edge on that spine itself. But we'll get all the way around the rest of this on the top, and then I'm going to flip this over and we'll catch the bottom side as well. Like I said, we're just using the exact same process, and I'm not worried about getting super deep where it's the single layer. I'm just taking off a little extra of the fuzz there, but then we'll get the back of that pocket edged off really nice and close there. All right, continue this, go through all the same steps that we did on the side there. I'm going to sand these edges. We'll apply our dye and then come back with our gum trag and slick them up so we got a nice glass edge around there. And then once I have those smoothed off and ready to go, we'll come back and talk about putting this on our book. All right, edges all slicked up like glass. We're liking that. Now, before you go to put your book into the cover, one thing I like to do is break open any glue. So anywhere we have excess glue. So I'm using this little creaser tool. You can use the end of a pencil in there. You can use your ruler, anything like that. So you don't have to have a special tool for it. You see where I just shove that in there and make sure we break open any extra glue so that you have that full pocket open when we go to put that cover in there. You want to make sure it fits really well. And with the measurements that we took, you're going to need your whole pocket to be open, especially if you don't have that glue broke up. It can kind of cause you issues fighting to get that cover in there, and we don't want to do that. Especially depending on the book, sometimes you can ruin those covers if you crank on it too bad, so be careful not to ruin anything. So getting that broke open is the first step to making things a little bit easier when we go to put this on. Oops, I got a little heavy on my glue on this end, so I had a little bit more to break loose there. There we go. You can see that break all the way out. Okay, now getting this put in here. The first side you put in, it's going to be real easy. You have both, everything's open to work with. Kind of work just a little at a time here. Again, measurements are snug enough. We want to make sure we get it all the way. I don't want to put too much extra pressure on my book, so I'm going to take it out because we are pretty snug here. Sticking good now. Okay, get that back out. I'm going to open up just a little bit more, make sure we get any other stretch out of that. Put a little pressure in those. Make sure we're good and open. Okay. May as well do the other side while I'm already at it here. Now if it gets too bad and we need to put a little stretch on it, we can wet down this side, but I don't think we're gonna have to do that. Okay, let's start with this back side, open that one up a little bit too. That one wasn't quite as snug, that one. Maybe because I just opened it up a little bit more, but that one fit in there really good. I'm gonna take it back out again, work separately from this front. So we don't have to fight that. Okay. There we go. Now that one's, that front's in there good. I can feel it all the way up to that edge. So we're looking pretty good there. Now, to get this back side, it went in pretty easy the first time. That's why I came back to the front. If you're gonna fight one, get your fight done first. Now your second one is gonna be easier. So we kind of open this up. The further we can open that, easier it is to get that set. If you have this down like flat and try to just crank your book all the way up to get in there, you can damage that. So if we open that up a little bit, it helps you get flex on both covers to come in and get that started. Now this actually has that elastic band on there, which we don't need for this application because we're putting a cover on it. So I'm going to come and actually just cut that off. There we go. I don't need that. Okay, now we'll open that back up. Get that in there. Again, careful not to crank on that book and break over our cardboard at all. There we go. Now that shuts really nice, lays flat. Open up, and with time too, you can get it to where, there we go, gets broke in. See how that'll open and lay flat because it pulls that cover out just a little bit on one of the sides. There, it closes again. Open back up. There we go. Nice book cover. Again, whether you're doing this actual monthly planner, which if you want this actual one, we'll drop that affiliate link in the description below. Also a link to the Leather Life community. If you want this tooling pattern, you can, and the measurements for the cut list, all that stuff, you can jump on there, be a part of the community, get your project done, whether it's this exact project or you take this pattern and use it on something else. Love to see what you do with it. You can post that there in the community and see what other people are doing with the same projects. So appreciate you guys. Thank you for allowing me to be on your Leathercraft journey, and look forward to seeing you in the next video.